I'd like to coach you to understand what is realistically achievable in terms of your interviewing skills if you're 1 week or less before your upcoming job interview. And this is based on my research and working with thousands of candidates and having helped people land jobs with the most FANG and high-performing companies. So the theory of becoming good at interviewing is quite simple. You only need two things. You need to be able to communicate well, that is to role play, and you need some stories. You need some substance, or a story bank, so to speak. If you get these two right, you will pass any interview with any high-performing company. If you do not take any of these two seriously, then your chances are quite limited to pass these interviews. Now, this being said, for each of these two, let's start with the role play. What does it take to become really good, to be exceptional communicator in job interviews? Well, to give some examples of what people with exceptional communication skills look like, look no further than teachers or educators or professional speakers, storytellers. These are the type of people who can communicate well. Politicians are also another great example of people who can communicate well and also listen, read people quite well. So most of the people I coach for these job interviews are not in this category. So if you're not in this category, you would basically, your takeaway from this is that you're not 1 week, but more like a few months, if not more, away from becoming a professional communicator or be an exceptional communicator in these job interviews. So basically it means you should set yourself the right type of expectations from these things, right? So basically within 1 week, the best you could do to improve your communication skills would be to do some role play eventually, to improve your listening skills, and these sort of things. Role play is quite obvious. If you do role play each and every single day for 1 week, for 1 hour, then in my experience, the results are pretty good. Again, in the context of preparing to pass your job interview on the communication skills rather than be an exceptional communicator in these job interviews. With respect to listening skills, the more you role play, the more you'll understand how the other party perceives your interview answers. But if you want to become a professional listener, look no further at recruiters. It takes years to become exceptionally good with listening skills and to be able to read people, right? So this should not be your primary objective, but rather, being intentional about listening to the other party during the job interview is sufficient for most types of candidates. And also another piece of good news here, very few roles, in my experience, are expected to be doing exceptionally well in their communication skills during job interviews. Most of the time, scoring reasonably well on clarity of thought will do the job, right? So this is how it would go. Now, what if I told you of a few traps that you want to avoid with these communication skills, and particularly if you're 1 week away from your job, 1 week or less away from your job interview? What happens is that some candidates choose to start with their tell me about yourself, your introductory statement, and you spend 3 days preparing an exceptional introductory statement. And what happens is during your job interview, you will actually deliver that amazing elevator pitch because, statistics are to your favor. They will always ask you this interview question. But what happens next is the exact opposite of that exceptional introductory statement. So basically, you shoot yourself in the foot because you set the expectations too high in these job interviews with respect to your communication skills, whereas, nobody expected you from this. So the professional fix, if you want, to this is that I always advise candidates to prepare their tell me about yourself, your motivation to join the company last, not first. Okay? The second thing, the only other thing that matters to pass interviews with high-performing companies is to have substance, to have your stories, something to sell yourself on during these job interviews. And if you want a statistic here, in my experience, 95% of candidates fail building a story bank that's good enough by their own standards by the time they go into that job interview. And this is regardless of candidates and whether you're 1 week or 1 month away from that job interview. So needless to say, this is also a challenging task if you want to do it professionally, right? Who can build a story bank, a professional story bank in 1 week or less? Well, someone who's really good at writing, or someone who's really good at critical thinking, or someone who's communicating their stories all day long, such as salespeople, right? This type of people can easily build their stories because they already have them fresh in their memory, right? But for the most candidates, and especially if you're 1 week or less before your job interview, you must prepare something that's reasonable for the amount of time you have and for your skills that you have. What is reasonable, some might ask? In my experience, a reasonable ask from a story bank going into a job interview refers to preparing a few stories on some key behaviors. Some key behaviors, for example, your ability to deliver in your previous role. If you convince the company that you're applying for that you're someone who delivers in their job, you're significantly more likely to get the job. The second behavior I'd prepare if I would go into this job interviews would be some stories around conflict and influence. A time when you had some beef with a colleague, or a time when you had to influence cross-functionally if you're applying for more senior types of roles. These are the types of questions that always get asked in these job interviews, and you must have them at hand, right? Depending again on the expectations for the role, but conflict and influence will also pop up during, especially during final interview rounds, but not only. Another one would be dealing with ambiguous situations, and even data-driven decision-making is also another very common topic that shows in interviews with many, if not all, high-performing companies. So definitely something you want to keep in mind. Maybe another story around invention or a simplification, depending what fits best for your role. And maybe another story about teamwork, right? So these were 6 stories in total that you would want to prepare going into a job interview. I don't believe this is a high ask, right, to prepare a basic story bank, with the condition that after you come up with these 6 stories, that you revise them at least 3 times. Okay, what do I mean by revising them? It could be as simple as role-playing them. Okay, so let's say, hey, I have this story. Okay, now let's role-play it, either with an interview coach, but you could do it in the mirror, on the spot if you want. It will bring in some signals that you didn't know were so relevant with respect to how good that story actually is, and more importantly, how good your interviewing skills are going into a job interview as early on in the process as possible, right? The second revision could be that you structured your story in the STAR format. Okay, I believe it's straightforward to understand, with the note that you don't want to front load your STAR answers. You want to focus on the action and the result. Of course, scoring as good as possible on, with some metrics, with some elements that you feel that fit into that specific format. And the third revision could simply be that you take a good look at it and you say, hey, is this clear enough? Maybe speak it out loud again. Does it score reasonably well on clarity? Clarity is what most candidates struggle with, especially while building their story bank. Right, so this would be the 3 revisions you would want to your 6 stories. Right, so this is perfectly reasonable going into an interview if you're 6 or 7 days or less. Right, what you want to avoid with these story banks, as with the communication trap, that you prepare something that's extremely amazing, but you will do the exact opposite with the rest of your interview. You want to avoid building a story bank that's too big. You want to avoid building a story bank that's 50 or more pages if you're 1 week or less into your job interview. Very few people can handle great, huge story banks. You have to be really good at writing or at synthesizing information to have a story bank and to manage it, and also to role play within such a short period of time. But again, if you simplify things and you know what to prepare, again, it's perfectly achievable. And this is a system that works. This is a system I sell actually in my training programs. So that's why I'm recommending it. So long story short, becoming good with interviews boils down to two things: your communication skills, your role play, and your stories, right? Your interview answers. If you get these two right, or sufficiently right, then you're in the absolute best spot to pass interviews. Right, so I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.